All right, Laney,
Awesome.
take it away.
Yeah, I'll just get going here. Um, yeah, we're here to talk about sustainable event planning. If you go to the next slide, you can see our agenda for today. Um, we're going to first dive into what is a sustainable event and talk about some challenges that might come with planning an event in general and also making it sustainable. And then we're going to talk about an overview of the waste reduction goals here at West Valley. And then through that, we'll highlight some of the sustainable events toolkit that Emily has been working on to provide some resources for you all to help plan events more sustainably. And then additionally, we'll talk about the regulatory requirements that go into these goals. And then we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. So, as a little introduction before we get talking here, my name is Laney. I'm a master's student at Stanford studying Earth systems, so it's like environmental science. And the past 5 years, I have worked at Stanford Residential and Dining Enterprise as a zero waste intern. So, I was implementing new waste sorting strategies and studying their effects through waste audits and surveying. I've spent a lot of time in different dumpsters around campus. Most recently, I worked with Emily studying the waste that is generated at events. So that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yes, and
And
hello. My name is Emily Blackwell. I'm currently the sustainability utility specialist within our residential and dining enterprise. So I do everything from waste and energy conservation, water conservation. But I started this role in July, and before this, I was actually a student at Stanford for the past 5 years. I was an intern, actually at the same time Laney was within R&DE, mostly focusing on preventative waste programs and working with our custodial teams. And then last year, I was a Living Lab Fellow for the new Door School of Sustainability, tasked with the goal of operationalizing sustainability within the new Door School. And it was really through events that we were targeting to do that. And so that's where this events toolkit came to be. And I've done trainings now. I think over 300 administrators and event planners across Stanford's campus over the past year. And that number just continues to grow, which is exciting to see it kind of grow and now get to go to another university and share this work too. So we're really excited to be here.
so before we start talking about how to plan a zero waste event, it's probably helpful to know what exactly we mean by a zero waste event or a sustainable event. Um, so what exactly do we mean by zero waste event? When we say zero waste, what we really mean is 90% or more of the waste generated at that event is diverted from the landfill. So our goal is to make sure that the materials generated at an event are recyclable or compostable and that they make it into the correct bin at the end of the day. So keeping this goal in mind as we plan and order for events from the very beginning is how we make zero waste a priority and really reduce our impact in terms of landfill generation. So next slide. Um, yeah, and again, before we talk about some tips and tricks, I think it'd be helpful to learn or hear about what challenges you may be facing or have faced in general for hosting an event. So maybe you don't think of yourself personally as an event planner, but I'm sure either professionally here at West Valley or even personally, anything from a club event to meetings to student activities, feel free if you want to type in the chat in these experiences, what challenges did you face in hosting or planning or helping with an event? And I know Nita, you've helped with a few, so maybe you can add some in the chat as well.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, catering. That's a pretty common one. Like knowing how much food to order, where to order the food from. Um, maybe there's an issue of RSVP knowledge. Like, are the people who signed up actually going to come? Will they sign up at all? Um, yeah, feel free to add them later as we keep going through this. But this catering issue and some of those issues that I just mentioned are actually really relatable, and they're actually quite common. Yeah, maximizing space for people for seating and walking. That's so true. Learning how to use the space. But all of these issues are pretty relatable. And even at Stanford, we've seen a lot of these problems with our event planners. So we've gathered similar data via survey answers from people who plan events at Stanford. And maybe some of these barriers listed on the right here look familiar to you. Lack of information, lack of time, maybe resistance from stakeholders, maybe limited budget. Like that's something that's pretty impossible to overlook. The budget is often a big guiding force in planning an event. Um, but we've taken this information and used it to guide the creation of a toolkit for planning events to be more sustainable. So really starting with the people who are planning these events to know what exactly is the problem so we can adequately create a solution for them. Um, so this is something that Emily and I are really passionate about as individuals, but it also represents goals of our university at Stanford and also West Valley College as well. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Yes. So at West Valley College, you have two goals, if you're not aware. The main one is reducing GHG emissions by 100% by 2035, and then striving to achieve zero waste to the landfill by 2030. We actually have the same zero waste goal as you all, which is really exciting. Makes it a little easier for us to talk about it with you. And if you're not aware, you also have an amazing resource available to you at West Valley College. There's the Sustainability Master Plan with the Sustainability Committee. So if you haven't looked at it, go through it and just see what your school offers and what is being worked on and how you can kind of contribute and work with that group. But it's important to know why we have a zero waste goal. Like what is the purpose behind it? And one of the main reasons is that waste is a climate issue. I'm sure we all have heard this before, but everything that ends up in our landfill is just buried in a ground and it produces really harmful emissions that are harming our climate. Um, and I think what's talked about a little bit less is that waste is a justice issue. So those same locations where landfills being buried, those same emissions that are harming the environment is also harmful to the surrounding communities. And those communities are predominantly lower income and communities of color. And here at Stanford, we're no different with where our waste goes. And it's really an issue across the United States. This is really, really driving the why behind a zero waste goal and why we want to go away from landfill.
Yes, exactly. So there's a myriad of reasons why we should care about waste in general for the sake of climate, for the sake of justice, for the sake of pure responsibility as a human on this earth. But you may be wondering, what exactly does this have to do with events? Why are we focusing on events today? So there's a few main reasons why Emily and I chose to work closely with event planning as a means to tackle the waste problem. And this includes events themselves act as a huge platform. So by nature, events are super interactive, meaning there's a lot of opportunity for culture change, teaching others about waste streams available here at West Valley and spreading knowledge about sustainable practices. So events in general, especially on a college campus, are kind of the backbone of the community. It's where people gather and talk and share ideas. So it's a great leverage point for teaching others about sustainability in general. Secondly, events usually means that there's a high amount of associated waste, whether it's yummy catering or party favors. Learning how to minimize this waste from the very beginning could make a huge dent in the waste that we're generating as a college in general. Additionally, events are an area that we have a lot of say over. So sometimes waste issues feel out of control, overwhelming, like you can't make any sort of difference. But when you are the one planning an event or helping plan an event, you have the opportunity to take full control over what might end up in the landfill bin. And this is just one place to start. It's one piece of the pie, and you can take a lot of these lessons with you into other areas of your life if you aren't thinking of yourself as an event planner right now. These goals and tips in general are really helpful overall. Next slide.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
so,
go
oh,
ahead,
do you
Laney.
want to take this one?
Go for it.
Okay. Um, Yeah, maybe this photo looks familiar to you. There's a lot of leftover food because people didn't show up, or maybe you ordered too much food. You in this top left photo, you can see all of the right waste streams were available, but the waste wasn't sorted properly. So these are exactly the problems we're trying to solve, and it takes teamwork. And the good news is that college campuses in general are pretty unique in that they are usually full of hungry people. So it's really a problem of trying to figure out how to get this excess food, if that's the excess that we have, and bring it to people who are wanting some of that food. So if you go to the next slide, Emily, um, I learned a lot as an intern. My project last year was to attend as many events at Stanford as I could, talking to caterers and food workers and event attendees to try and get a better understanding of the problems and some possible solutions. So I learned a lot about what waste is being generated and where that waste is ending up. And I chose this slide to show to you today because I thought it was the most surprising data that I collected about food waste. So in this case, or in the case where there was excess food at the end of an event, a lot of that food is actually being eaten later on, either by staff members who are catering the event or hungry students, etc. So this is actually really exciting, and it speaks to an intrinsic thought pattern that we continue to view food as valuable. So that's something that we should be celebrating. And it also speaks to a common truth that college students are usually pretty hungry and love free food. So how can we move with this momentum, making it easy as possible to get access food to the people who want and need it? We can maybe this looks like adding, encouraging your guests to bring Tupperware at the end, or at the end when there's excess food, making an active effort to give it away to students and attendees. And this next slide here is talking about how this is an example of culture change. So, as we saw in that photo, and as I'm sure you're familiar with, it's not enough to place the right bins with the right labels. We have to learn and teach others how to reduce waste in general. And we have to teach others how to value food, remind them to bring Tupperware in case of leftovers. This is something that has to, it's a change that involves the whole culture. It can't just be brought about through a systems change. And on the next slide here, you can see an example of this where, as a community, as a society, we have a norm where if you see someone throwing a piece of trash directly on the ground, you might be likely to mention it to them and say, "Hey, that's not allowed." There's even some laws in place. But if someone were to put the wrong piece of waste in the wrong stream, maybe throw away their compost instead of putting it in the compost bin, it's not really an established norm for us to intervene in that point. So that's just one example of how having a culture and a cultural norm is something that can really move us forward in terms of sustainability. And then when we're thinking about those waste sorting practices, a lot of the sorting rules are going to be pretty school specific. So Emily and I know everything there is to know about Stanford's waste streams, and we can talk all day about it if you have any questions about the specifics of the waste streams at Stanford. And I'm sure that some rules probably still apply to West Valley, but we also encourage you to do a little more digging to find out exactly what goes where at West Valley. And I believe there may be another speaker coming up that will be specifically talking about that. So keep an eye out. But in general, it is a good idea to take a responsible risk with recycling. So a lot of recycling facilities are pretty adept at sorting the recycling they receive. So if you're pretty confident that what you're holding can be recycled, take a responsible risk with that item. Secondly, compost is also generally pretty easy to tell. Food scraps and soiled cardboard generally are pretty standard for compost, but unlike recycling, they don't have as much sorting after you place it in the bin. So it's really important to be more cautious with what you're choosing to compost. And then finally, landfill as the last resort. So this material is not going to be sorted at all. So the second that it leaves your hand, nobody will ever be touching it again. So it should really be a last resort, and this is the stream that we're trying to reduce as much as possible.
Again, as Laney said, it's going to be a little different for West Valley than it is here at Stanford. At Stanford, we have single stream recycling, so all of our paper, cans, glass can all go into one stream. And we do accept compostable plastics. Some places, even within the Bay Area, don't accept compostable plastics. So it's important to know how it differs for your school, but also for your community where you live, because it does look very different, which makes waste sorting so hard. But again, as Laney said, there are some general things that, are pretty standard across the board. With compost, food and soiled paper and soiled cardboard are going to go into the compost. With landfill, especially regarding events, any service gloves that you have or utensils that don't say compost on it, and any sort of snack wrapper, those are always going to be landfill. So that's also something to keep in mind as you're ordering snacks for an event. If you have a ton of chip bags, keep in mind that all of that is landfill. So again, this is Stanford specific, but just something to keep in mind, and to dig a little bit more for West Valley. And just to go back to event planning and why we're all here, event planning is really hard. Whether you're a full-time event planner or you're an administrator who every once in a while has to put together an event, there's so many components to it outside of sustainability, outside of zero waste, that are really hard to navigate. And we don't always have time to address all of these issues. And that's something that I found at Stanford when I was working here as a student. All of our resources for event planners were scattered across so many different websites, and sustainability was often a separate thing. It wasn't really integrated into any resources available. So if you wanted or were excited about event planning and sustainability, you'd have to take an extra step on your own versus it being integrated and being a norm in how we do things. And so to kind of solve this issue, I set out to achieve four things: centralize event resources, integrate sustainability into that, and address pain points and challenges for all of these areas around event planning, and also connect with the campus climate goals. There's a real purpose and reason behind the work that we're doing. And we also wanted it to, really encompass this idea of the relationship model and fostering community. So instead of envisioning planning a zero waste event being the sole responsibility of the event planner, we're sharing that responsibility across all of our stakeholders, right? It's the event planner, but it's also the attendees and the vendors that we're working with. And so I wanted to frame all these resources with that in mind so that we can really achieve that culture change that we want to reach these goals. And that gave birth to the first rendition of the toolkit, which you will all have access to if you're interested. Again, it is completely Stanford specific, all of our resources. It has since been turned into a website and is used by our event planners. That is for Stanford people only, so I can't share that part with you, but it's really exciting that this momentum has really pushed forward. So if there's anyone who's excited about sustainable events and sustainability and wants to figure out how to do this within your campus, I really want to emphasize going through this toolkit and seeing if you could do something similar for your school. And for all the students here, I did this as a student, so you can make an impact too. And I hope you all feel inspired to do that after this. But I'm gonna kind of walk through just some of the simple things that we can do to work towards hosting a zero waste event, and again, sharing that responsibility across all of these different stakeholders. And so the first is pretty simple: using an RSVP form to help order the correct amount of food. I'm sure this is an issue at West Valley. It is a big issue at Stanford, but we have people who RSVP and never show up. It's part of our norm. You overextend yourself. You think you want to go, and then all of a sudden you're really tired and like, I don't really want to travel over there to go to that event. I did that as a student. I will own it. I have done it before. But with RSVP forms and with any sort of sign up form, you can use sustainable language again to share that responsibility. So an example of including sustainable language is: do you plan to attend this event? Help us order food accurately to reduce food waste. RSVP responsibly, right? Give people the option to, yes, order food for me. No, don't order food for me. And there's still gonna be people who sign up and don't show up. But now there's an awareness of consequences to their actions if they don't do this, and slowly kind of working on changing the culture and the norms around events. Another example is asking people if they're going to bring Tupperware or utensils or mugs. Again, not everyone's going to remember to do this, but the more and more we hear and see these things, the more likely, we're going to see that culture shift happen. At Stanford, we also have a lot of event signups that are for smaller groups. And so we have spreadsheets that people fill out with their items. So if you do that, this is just another example of what you can do. Like, we're committed to reducing our emissions from food purchases. Consider choosing a plant-based meal and reduce the emissions of your meal by 90%, right? You're not forcing people to make decisions. You're not forcing people to choose only plant-based items, but you can, again, provide the information, make the recommendations, and allow people to make those choices. And over time, again, we're going to see that culture change. And one example that we have here on incentivizing culture change is with our own Door School Dean's Office. They have a monthly staff meeting. And the administrator who runs this meeting, who I worked closely with my fellowship, started by simply asking people to bring a cup, a mug, and a plate and utensils. And for each one of those items, they got a raffle ticket. And each raffle ticket would go in and they could win a really cool prize. And she did that for a few months. And now there's no raffle, and almost everybody brings their own plate, their own cup, their own mug. And so this is just an example of how we can incentivize culture change as well. All right, moving on to catering. So there's a few different things you can do. For larger events, it's really important to try to order shared buffet style food instead of individual packaging, and using reusable or compostable plates, cups, utensils whenever you can. So part of how to do this too is really communicating waste reduction goals with your caterer, right? If you want all compostable items, tell your caterer, let them know that this is what I'm trying to do, and they can also help work with you. We want to prioritize reusables. Again, I know there is such a big budget constraint around that. So if it's not available, asking for that certified compostable, and also asking your event attendees to bring their own materials. We've also had event planners who have purchased their own compostable plates and utensils and then asked their caterers not to bring any at all so that they have their stats and use that. When it comes to utensils, making sure that they're not bundled or packaged together, and also asking your caterer for food recovery plans, such as bringing to-go containers, especially for those larger events. Part of my work in my fellowship is that I actually had conversations with over 40 of our common caterers about zero waste, about hosting events, about working with them and catering. And there is an overwhelming support from caterers to plan sustainable events with us here at Stanford, and I'm sure for you as well. So don't be afraid to go out and actually talk to them and make these sustainable requests.
Yeah, and not only do we have these like school-wide goals that we mentioned in the very beginning, but a lot of this toolkit is also designed to follow some new regulations set by California, which are pretty exciting, including this new Senate bill, Assembly Bill 1276, that does not allow for utensils to be bundled. So this is still super new. There's still a lot of work to be done to make sure we're all in compliance with this new regulation, but it is kind of falls on us. And like Emily was saying, like the relationship model, we can help each other out to make sure that the caterer knows, that you know, that in general, as a state, we're trying to move away from those bundled single-use utensils. And the reasoning behind that is usually when you get a bundle of a spoon, a fork, and a knife, and maybe a napkin, really you're only going to use the fork. And so the other two single-use items are kind of useless, and it's just kind of a waste to have that plastic being created. So the alternative to that is to provide, if you are providing single-use utensils, to provide them in bulk so that your guests will take only what they need. And of course, hopefully we're prioritizing these single-use utensils to be made of something that's biodegradable or compostable, such as bamboo utensils. paper straws or plant-based plastics if the reuse option isn't available. Yeah, it's a really exciting bill. It's kind of new to all of us, so it's great to hear. It's exciting to see how it's going to play out in California. But another important step in hosting a sustainable event is to make sure the correct waste bins are available. So this is another thing that's a little school specific, knowing about your waste bins and systems or streams. If it's a smaller event, maybe this just means locating the existing bins in the location of the event and making sure that they are accessible. If it's a larger event where you need to order extra event bins, think about what type of waste you might be generating at this event. If you only have recyclable and compostable materials, you can skip the landfill bin altogether, or maybe order one landfill bin and two recycling bins. Just thinking about these ratios will help your guests understand where they should be placing their waste at the end of the event. And there's a lot of like psychology that goes into this. Where are you placing the bins in relationship to each other? If the landfill bin is super accessible and the recycling bins are like tucked away, you're probably not going to have anyone recycling at your event. So making sure that there's access to all of the bins, that they are labeled really clearly. You can see in this photo, this was kind of a bad job because there's not really any clear signage there. And you can see how those compostable materials actually ended up in all three streams. So making sure you have the right bins and the right labels and they're available will be super helpful. And letting your guests know about what is available at your event for sorting your waste. And in the next slide, you can see this lovely image, an example of a waste audit, which I'm very familiar with. As an intern, I did a lot of auditing throughout campus. And this is kind of where I learned again that it's not just having the right bins, but also the right signage and the right usage of the bins. So it's sad to see that 62% of our landfill waste at Stanford is actually recyclable or compostable. But it also is kind of exciting to know that with the right behavior change and culture change and signage, we can hopefully reduce the amount of landfill that we're creating by a pretty dramatic amount. So now we just need to figure out the best ways to get all of this sorting correct so that we can make sure that compostables and recyclables are ending up in the correct stream instead of in the landfill where they don't belong. And one way to kind of approach this task, in addition to having clear signage and maybe making an announcement about what waste bins are available. One technique that we've used at Stanford is bin monitors. So this is where passionate students or event planners spend a little bit of time by the bins at the event, teaching attendees what goes where in your waste stream system. I've done this before, and I will admit I was a little intimidated at first, and it kind of sounds like a daunting task. But what I found is that people tend to really appreciate being able to sort correctly. So no one is out here, no one is villainous in their sorting. No one is purposefully trying to mix up their waste. That's usually not the case. The case is that it's usually kind of complicated, and learning the streams it's a difficult learning curve. And every system is slightly different. And when you are at the waste bin and you kind of are panicking, don't know where to put it, probably you will end up putting it in the trash. So having a friendly face at nearby these waste bins to help you direct your waste into the correct stream is super, super helpful. And it's, from my experience, a very positive interaction. And this is a great example of how you can help others learn about the streams. And it's a very lasting lesson. So once they've started to understand and had someone help them out this first time, they're going to think about it a little bit more the next time that they are faced with those three bins. So that's one technique to get involved as a student or as an event planner if you're really passionate about making sure that the waste ends up in the right stream, because the last thing we want is to put in all of this work to make sure the materials are compostable and recyclable, and then at the last step they make it into the landfill. So this is a great technique.
Yeah, and One other thing we're really working on incorporating throughout all of our events at Stanford is actually having an announcement to attendees what is compostable versus recyclable versus landfill at an event. For example, you can announce everything at this event is compostable. Please make sure to discard your waste in the compost bins located here right before everyone grabs food. Or your food container is recyclable. When you finish, scrape off your food into the green compost bin and then place your container in the recycling bin here. You can also add labels or signage that say the same thing if you don't have an event that allows for an announcement. But we've also found that this has been a really effective way as well to just let people know that waste sorting matters and that they should think about it, especially at their event. Um, now, Needy did tell us that a lot of these events that you're hosting too may be individual meetings where you're not attending yourself and no one's there to actually make an announcement. So you can also email attendees about waste sorting ahead of time. This is just an example of email of what you can say. Just we're excited to have you join us at this event. As part of our goal to achieve zero waste by 2030, we ask you help us in sorting waste properly. Here's how you sort it. I won't be there, but we greatly appreciate your help in doing this. Simple, sweet, and again, just getting more information out there to attendees and making it more of a regular occurrence that they need to sort their waste properly. Again, this is just part of that relationship model, part of sharing the responsibility of planning a zero waste event. Um, and then we have another law, Senate Bill 1383. It mandates that all recoverable food is donated for human consumption. So at Stanford, all of our food generators on campus, including our events, are required to donate surplus edible food. And we do have a couple pilots that we're starting to do to try to support and make sure we're in compliance of this law. But just something to keep in mind as you're planning your event. And again, reducing food waste from the start is the best approach. Donating food is pretty complex and can get tricky at times. But we're also working to celebrate running out of food, which is a very hard norm to achieve because I know I was a student and I want my free food at the fence. Um, but when it comes to donating extra food, just have some sort of plan in place. Um, Make sure you avoid putting all the food all out at once to increase the likelihood of it being donated if there's excess. Once food is out, um, especially for those larger events or buffet style, it's no longer considered donatable. It's still, attendees can still take it home to go. But if you have, a lot of food and a lot of people, just avoid putting it all at once. Another one is to just have your attendees bring to-go containers or provide them to take home leftovers. At Stanford, we utilize a lot of our department's shared spaces and Slack channels and email distribution lists for buildings to let people know when there's extra food. And again, for larger events, just actually working with the caterer themselves for food recovery. That's the easiest thing to do when you have a larger event. And as a last resort, we always want to compost leftover food. As you all know, food will produce methane in the landfill, which will be very bad for our environment and the health of those communities around them. Now, I have a big gripe with swag and decorations. Um, the best swag is no swag. I know that's so hard to hear. But as a student, I would get all of these really weird, little gizmos and trinkets and or shirts with dates on them, and they'd be really cool to get, but they did not last very long with me. They, ended up being thrown out because they're just not always the highest quality. If you do want to offer some sort of swag, make sure there's no branding dates. Really try to emphasize quality over quantity and something that can be reused at other events. So if you have an annual conference that you do, instead of saying conference name 2025, just the conference name. And then if you have extras, you can use them again the following year. You can also offer some sort of experience or give natural products. We like to give cookies or flowers. We also have bookmarks that have flower seeds so they can plant them if they don't want it for a bookmark for reading. A lot of raffle prizes again, so you can offer higher quality products and really trying to cut out those toys and gadgets and reducing the variety of products and um, also reaching out to each other. If anyone has leftover things, if you want to give things to each other, we have a Stanford Slack channel that has over, I think, 600 event planners on it, and they're constantly asking and sharing advice, sharing extra decorations, sharing extra swag with each other, which is amazing to see how that community can really help us build um, to reach our zero waste goal. Now, with decorations, any sustainability person has to say this. We hate balloons. I know balloons are still going to be used, but when possible, kind of eliminating the use of balloons. We haven't found any like green alternatives. If you find any, please let us know because we know how much we love balloons here. But another thing that you can use instead is fresh flowers. They look beautiful, they smell beautiful. You can also give them to attendees at the end. Um, Making sure you're using QR codes instead of flyers, avoiding using non-recyclable materials for any posters that you have. Again, branding dates, super important not to include branding dates so that it can be reused. And again, asking each other for decorations and seeing what's already available. Reuse is always an amazing option to choose. So again, this is just a very, brief consolidated form of the toolkit that I produce just on the sustainability side. There's a lot here. But if there's one thing that I'm going to add to this, it's just to reflect, celebrate, and track your progress. Something as simple as keeping track of each of your events that you do, your number of RSVPs ordered for, who attended, was there leftover food, not only for your sake for planning, but also you can kind of keep track of, how many people aren't showing up. Is there a consistency with this? Should I order less food here? But you can also keep track of specific caterers. Maybe you have a caterer that you have made the request so many times to have non-bundled utensils, and they keep bringing them, right? Knowing that going into it. So if it's a caterer you love and everyone loves their food, maybe don't ask for any utensils at all. And if they bring them to you, just deny them and turn them away, and you purchase your own ahead of time. So it just allows you to kind of keep track of your events and what you're planning. It's also great for end of year reviews. If you can talk about the sustainability work and the zero waste achievements that you're reaching with your event planning too. And that kind of leads into my next thing. At Stanford, we're really trying to work on integrating sustainability into our job expectations and our goal settings. Our Office of Sustainability actually just hired someone who's planning all of their events and also helping with the sustainable event movement. But they put it into their job description that their events that they plan have to be sustainable, have to really work on achieving that zero waste. And again, tracking your metrics is a really great way to do it so that you can reflect on the work that you're doing and be able to tell your boss that you're doing all these things. And also really important is that it's progress and not perfection. Okay, all of this is really hard to do. We're not always going to get it right. And even here at Stanford in our sustainability department, we don't always do it correctly. And again, sometimes it's something that fell through the cracks with us. Sometimes it just didn't work out with that caterer and they brought something we didn't ask them to. And that's okay. Just as long as we're pushing forward and really trying to learn from our mistakes and grow from them and just continuing to try to achieve that zero waste goal. Okay, we're almost there. We have two more slides for you. So again, we've thrown so much at you and it can be pretty overwhelming. And so just a few key takeaways for things that you can just start doing right now with all of your events, right? Including the sustainable language in your RSVP forms. Make a sustainable request to your caterer every time. If you're on DoorDash and they let you put in comments at the bottom, make the comment about no bundled utensils, please. Just get comfortable making those requests. Try to take note of what kind of waste is being generated at your event so you know what kind of bins you need to accommodate that, right? Have a plan to donate leftover food, even if it's as simple as I'm going to give it to the students when they're done. That's a plan. That's amazing, right? But just think about it ahead of time. and then just track what you're doing so that you can learn from yourself and grow from yourself and your events too. Okay. You also, again, have amazing sustainability resources available to you and the Sustainable Committee and that guide. So if you haven't gone through it, I will be sure to include it in the slides so that Needy can share it with you all after this so that you can look through it and just figure out how you can get into sustainability on your campus as well. So with that, you made it through. We have quite a little bit of time for questions, but we just want to thank Needy for having us and all of you for allowing us to come speak. And if you have questions, we are ready for them.
I have a quick, first of all, thank you very much for the great presentation. I learned a lot. And what about single-use plastic bags? I hear that they can become recyclable if you put them together instead of just as a single putting it into the garbage, into the waste. Is that true?
Yes. So I know here at Stanford, any sort of plastic film, as long as you bundle them together, we will accept that. A lot of grocery stores also will take their plastic bags back if you bring them all there too. So I actually didn't know about that either, but yes, with the caveat with it may be different for West Valley, but at least here at Stanford, we do take plastic bags as long as they're bundled.
Yes. I have a question too. You may have mentioned this, but I just want to be clear. Are you able to share some of your resources, your lists of caterers and such with us?
Yes. So I am going to share the Sustainable Events Toolkit that's on Google Drive that's available for anybody. And that has a link to the list of caterers that I reached out to and was able to talk with.
Great. Thank you so much.
Emily, if possible, is it possible to share it right now in chat so that
Yes.
everyone can have it right away?
Yes.
Thank you, Emily.
Right. What other questions do we have? What about students? Who's a student here?
Hi, I really liked your presentation and I'm a student here. I'm wondering what Stanford is doing on Earth Day for their events.
Yes. So we have a few different events coming up. There's a big, context. Stanford dorms are broken up into a couple different neighborhoods. So each neighborhood is having Earth Day sustainability events. And there's one neighborhood I am working with that there'll be over 2,000 people at their event. So we're working on having the sustainable catering and having all of that. Will also, my department in R&DE is going to be tabling there to teach students how to live sustainably at Stanford, and also connecting with the Office of Sustainability so that they can just learn more. Yeah, we have a lot of kind of fairs. Laney, do you know more? Any other ones?
There's a lot of student-run events on that day, I think. We have a club called Students for Sustainable Stanford, SSS, and they frequently on Earth Day do a big event or campaign on campus. And yeah, I'm not quite sure, but I'm excited to see what everyone gets up to.
I really like the presentation, so I really appreciate all the efforts that you put into it. And also, I really want to mention and remind everyone, like Laney and Emily, they both actually dug out our own web pages from West Valley College and looked at our sustainability goals and master plans and try to cater their presentation towards what we are doing. So I really appreciate that. I have one question, actually two questions. What are your biggest challenges when you were doing this, and then how did you address them? And then second question is, did you have to face any pushback from on any of the things that you were doing?
Yeah, so wow, I talked to more event planners than I can count building this toolkit out. And the hardest thing to balance was the non-sustainable resources. And all of the other challenges that they face that make it really hard to even start to think about sustainability at all. Everywhere from, what venue can I do? Different venues have different requirements when it comes to catering. Some venues you can only get if you work in that department, so you'd have to like go through somebody else. And so there was so many different nuances that I had to juggle. There's definitely pushback along the way when it comes to reusables and compostables and the price. When it comes to sustainability, we often think of sustainability as, well, it's a lot more dollar signs associated with it. But we actually pulled some of our past events that the Door School had and compared the more sustainable versus the less sustainable events. And it wasn't really as expensive. And at times it was less expensive. And so it's just reshaping our minds around not always assuming sustainable is more expensive. So we just provided specific examples to those event planners that were facing that. Yeah, but I also was very fortunate that I did have backing from the CFO of the Door School to, allow for a little extra room in the budget to really focus on sustainability. And I did a training for all the administrators in the Door School, and the dean came, our CFO came, and they were all really helping champion this. So getting them on board, I think, is what made this as impactful as it's been. Did I answer all of it? I don't know.
Yes, you did. You did an amazing job answering, and I really like that you try to bring in everyone who was responsible in decision making and make that impactful. So that buy-in was super helpful, right? So we hope to get that too.
Yeah, I was an RA at Stanford for 3 years, and they say, here's a large sum of money, have fun for the year. So we planned our own events, and even though I was working in sustainability my senior year, I still would not have known where to start to even attempt to make my on-calls more sustainable. But we're starting to work with students a lot more with student-run events, which is also really exciting.
And in general, I presume the students have been receptive.
Yeah. So we table constantly on campus. So every new student orientation, every grad fair, undergrad fair that we can possibly go to, we are there, and we're sharing information and connecting with students. We do a lot of bin monitoring and actually get to talk to students a lot through there. And they're really excited. But it's similar to the event planners, that they're excited, but they don't necessarily have the resources to know how to do it without it being like an extra burden to them. And so that's where we come in, and we're trying to make not only being excited about it, but actually acting on it so much easier, and make that second nature. So we've done it a lot, with event planning, but now let's dive into the students more.
Yeah, and I'll just that like Emily and I are very excited to make this connection with West Valley. We're very immersed in like the Stanford sustainability world, but it's really exciting to see that there are other places working on sustainability and are excited about this, and that so many people wanted to come to hear us talk about sustainable events is really good sign to me, and I'm glad to see you all here. So my thank you to you all, and to Niti for reaching out and organizing this